angel informs the soul, and the soul informs the person, and that dream derives from above when souls leave the body and ascend, each in its own way. How many rungs upon rungs in the mystery of a dream, all in the mystery of wisdom. Come and see, dream one rung, vision one rung, prophecy one rung. What does he mean there? Dream, Gabriel, vision, Shekhinah, prophecy, Netzach, and Hod. Okay, just one more time here. Dream, Gabriel, vision, Malchut or Shekhinah, prophecy, Netzach, and Hod. So he's playing with the Sfirot, Netzach, and Hod. Come and see his quiet, bodily vigor. Soul, Prop, Gabriel, vision, Malchut or Shekhinah, prophecy, Netzach, and Hod. So he's playing with the Sfirot. He's hinting at the Sfirot. Dream one rung. Again, rung often means Sfirah. Vision one rung, prophecy one rung. All rungs upon rungs, one above another. Now we come to Joseph. Hey, look how long it's taken him to get to Joseph. Actually, one rabbi began, now the second rabbi continues, and finally comes back to the verse we're supposed to be interpreting. Joseph dreamed a dream and told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. Okay, the dream of the sheaf, Joseph's sheaf, and the brothers bowing down, the brother sheaves bowing down to Joseph's sheaf. From here we learn that a person should tell his dream only to one who loves him. You shouldn't tell your dream to someone who doesn't like you. Why? Otherwise, he may prove decisive. For that, if that dream changes tone, he is the cause. What does that mean? Otherwise, that person you've told the dream to who doesn't like you, that person might prove decisive because the dream could change tone based on your enemy's interpretation. Remember the power of the word, the power of interpretation. The interpretation can determine what the dream means. Look at note 207. Otherwise, he may prove decisive. If the dreamer tells his dream to someone who hates him, this enemy can harm him by the spiteful tone of his interpretation, which affects the fulfillment of the dream. And we'll see this now with how the brothers interpreted Joseph's dream. Okay, it changes tone. What does that mean? The dream could mean one thing or another thing. The dream is somewhat open-ended, but an interpretation freezes the meaning into one, either positive or negative. It could change tone. It could take on a specific tone. Come and see. We're near the end of the passage now. Come and see. Since Joseph told his dream to his brothers, they caused it to be postponed, delaying it for 22 years. Now, what is this talking about? Joseph, the dream is that the brothers will bow down to Joseph. That eventually happens. You may remember, eventually Joseph's brothers go down to Egypt to find grain because there's drought, there's famine, and they don't realize it, but Joseph, who now is a viceroy to the king, they have to come to Joseph to ask for grain. They come to Joseph, he knows who they are, but they don't know who he is. They bow down to him, thinking they're bowing down to the viceroy of Egypt, but they're actually bowing down to Joseph as Joseph's dream predicted 22 years earlier. According to biblical chronology or rabbinic understanding of biblical chronology, that took 22 years. Look at note 208, page 117, the left-hand column, note 208. The first dream recounted by Joseph, which we read, look, we were binding sheaves in the field, and look, my sheaf arose and actually stood up, and look, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. As indicated by Rabbi Levi in the Talmud, notice the same pages again, the dream material in Brachot. It took 22 years for this dream to be fulfilled. In other words, for Joseph's brothers to bow down to him in Egypt, as described later in Genesis. Okay, so because Joseph told his dream to his brothers and they disliked him, they enabled the dream to be delayed. They messed with the dream. Maybe otherwise the brothers would have bowed to him right away. It took 22 years because Joseph made the mistake of telling it to his brothers who disliked him. But Rabbi Yossi now adds something else. Rabbi Yossi said, how do we know this? Because it is written they hated him even more. Right? When he told them that dream, they hated him even more. What does hated him mean? They provoked accusers against him. They stimulated negative forces. They stimulated demonic powers up in heaven who delayed the dream. That's what it says in the note. What is written? He said to them, listen, please, to this dream that I dreamed, begging them to listen. Then he revealed that dream to him. Right? The dream that we know, the sheaves bowing down. If they had transformed its tone, if they could have changed the meaning of the dream, if they had transformed its tone so it would have been fulfilled, they could have made the dream mean something else. But how did they respond? They responded by saying, will you really reign over us? Will you really rule over us? Suddenly they had told him the interpretation of the dream, enacting a decree. That is why they hated him even more. So what's going on here? The Zohar is saying, because Joseph's brothers said, will you really reign over us? By saying that, by verbalizing that, they made that into what the dream meant. That's what the dream could have meant. We think that's what the dream did mean. But because they said it, they sealed their fate. They enacted a decree. They put it into words. They mouthed that meaning, and that meaning then held. Look at note 211, page 117, the left-hand column. If they had transformed its tone, if the brothers had interpreted the dream unfavorably for Joseph, it would have been fulfilled accordingly. However, their spontaneous, hateful response, will you reign over us? Guaranteed that the dream would be actualized precisely that way by Joseph's dominance. By verbally expressing this interpretation, they had sealed both their fate and his. Realizing what they had done to themselves, they hated Joseph all the more. Okay, that seems to be the last element Rabbi Yossi is adding. They realized what they had done. They spurted it out. They let out the meaning of the dream. Then they were stuck with it. They hated him all the more because they had sealed their fate. Let's stop the share now and open it up to discussion. A lot of material here, a lot of ideas. I see a lot of things in the chat. Maybe Ari can start us off, and then
there's some great input. I think Zoom has changed my ability, because if there's too much chatting, I can turn it off and control it. But this week has not enabled me to do it. So
sure, fine.
The good news is it allows people to chat. It's been a generally very good chat. And the challenge is people are trying to focus on so many different things. It does frustrate some people. So that being said, there was a great question. This dreams and ladders that was an obvious reference or tied into Jacob's ladder to some of our people here. So I want you to comment on that, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting, because Jacob's ladder, of course, is a dream, right? Jacob dreams of a ladder. He doesn't climb the ladder, but he's dreaming of a ladder. And here we have the image of ladder with dream. So that's a wonderful connection. I see one thing in the chat I want to respond to right away. Yeah, someone already answered it partly. We see a lot of masculine names in the Sefirot. What about feminine names? Let's take a look at this. So are there women in the Sefirot? And there are certain women, mainly with Shekhinah, as you might guess. Malchut, her technical name is Malchut, but I'm referring to her as Shekhinah. So various women, biblical female heroes are associated with Shekhinah, especially Sarah, Abraham's wife. Esther, Queen Esther, other women as well, but Leah, Rachel, who is the mother of Joseph, Jacob's wife. Rachel is associated with Malchut. Jacob's other wife, Leah, is associated with Bina, which is interesting. Rachel is more of a positive figure, is much more of a hero in Jewish tradition than Leah, and Rachel is portrayed more positively in the Torah than Leah is. But Leah reaches a higher rung in the Kabbalah. Leah is Bina, maybe because she's more hidden. There's allusions to Leah being hidden and Bina is a more hidden realm than Malchut. So you do have feminine imagery. Look, we have to say this: the Kabbalah was created almost entirely, if not entirely, by men. The people who studied it for centuries were almost entirely men. Now that has changed, that is changing dramatically, but still we have to be aware of the masculine bias of this whole system, and that applies to all of Western religious thought. Judaism, Christianity, Islam are all very patriarchal, and that's changing not quickly enough, but in very significant ways. So this question of gender is a constant thing we have to address and confront.
Right. The question about Michael and Gabriel, do they appear a lot in the Zohar, or is this a unique reference?
Not that often. The Zohar does have angels, but it doesn't specify Michael and Gabriel that often. Sometimes it prefers stranger names. There are many other angels. They're whole encyclopedias, dictionaries of angels. You can find more in Hebrew, but some in English too. Zohar doesn't refer to angels so often in its main text, but then there are parts of the Zohar that have more angelic material. So Michael and Gabriel go back to earlier tradition, and Gabriel is mentioned in the Bible, in the book of Daniel. Michael, I believe, is also mentioned a couple times in the Bible. And then in rabbinic literature, you have 4 archangels: Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. Michael and Gabriel are 2 major archangels in rabbinic tradition.
So I think we talked about prophets and their ability to interpret dreams, right? So I wanted to tie that in. And but we also know that our tradition says that there's no more prophecy. So does that mean that people can't interpret dreams now anymore? How does prophets and their interpretation of dreams fit into this whole?
It's not so much that prophets interpret dreams. I mean, that you do find it in the book of Daniel. There are dreams, and then Gabriel helps to interpret the dream. What the Zohar is saying. Well, let's start with that line, that amazing line in the Talmud. A dream is 1/60th of prophecy. So you might say, we don't have prophecy anymore. We have little hints of prophecy. One of the ways you get a hint of prophecy is in a dream. So a dream is a fraction of prophecy. But then the question of interpreting the dream, what's significant in the Zohar passage is that human interpretation has great power. You're not so much waiting for God to interpret the dream. You're trying to find out what the dream means. So you have to be careful who you tell your dream to. Okay, so people who use psychoanalysis, be careful who you pick to be your analyst. It has to be someone who's on your side. Now, that could raise. Certainly, people could object to that and argue that out of the room very quickly. But the Zohar is comparing dream to prophecy, but not equating them. As your question of prophecy has ceased, that is a good rabbinic notion. That with the last of the biblical prophets, Malachi, prophecy ceased. Not everyone accepted that. In the Middle Ages, you have debates. It's called the Holy Spirit, Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh still manifests maybe at a slightly lower rung than prophecy, but still being inspiration. Sometimes this is called Bat Kol, right? An echo, literally the daughter of a voice. So you don't get God's voice, but you get the daughter of God's voice. You get an echo, a heavenly echo.
Okay, I'm just going to quickly read from the Zohar. Here we go. This is the notes section. Korban and Olah drawing near and ascending. Korban, an offering, a sacrifice. The root kurv means to draw near. Why Korban, the final Hebrew letter Nun, seems superfluous. Korban, the drawing near. Rabbi Shimon reads the word as Queruvan, the final Nun, is understood as a pronominal suffix meaning there. Thus the word means the drawing near to the holy crowns, the Sephiroth. This interpretation originates in Bahir. Why is it called Korban? Because it draws near the holy forms, another reading the holy powers. The Kabbalists of the 13th century relied on the Bahir and elaborated this particular teaching, as Rabbi Shimon indicates. This is well known to the comrades. The Korban is a sacrament unifying all the aspects of divinity and symbolizing the ascent of the human soul on the ladder of the Sephiroth.
Somehow that's seen as a kind of inspiration, a kind of Holy Spirit that could make up for the lack of prophecy.
Alex has been waiting patiently, so I'm going to unmute him to ask his question.
Thank you. Hello, Daniel. So my question, if you could say a few words about Sephiroth hierarchy, how one should understand it? Is it like the higher rounds or the higher Sephiroth more kind of challenging to comprehend, goes from top to down, and specifically the Tiferet is below Gevurah and Hesed, and what does it mean?
I'm sorry, what was the last thing specifically? What about Gevurah?
Tiferet is below Gevurah and Hesed. How do you understand such?
Yeah. Okay. Let's take a look again at the diagram. So, this diagram is very helpful, but it's also problematical because it Shekhinah is down here, and we go up level by level. Zohar did use the word rungs. I mentioned Sulam Aliyah, the ladder